Everyone, and welcome to our presentation today called Things I Can Do to Protect My Network from Being Hacked. We'd like to start off by explaining the format of today's WebEx. This is a two-way interactive session, and you'll see the slides on the screen and hear live audio from our speakers. You may participate in today's discussion by submitting questions to be answered online by our speakers and our speaker moderators using the Q&A panel located on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type your question and hit submit. Please use the chat window if you're having any technical issues, and I'll address them as your moderator. Please note we will be recording this session for future reference. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for their time today and hand it off to our first speaker, Monica Lewis. Monica, oh, you're muted. There we go.
Hello and welcome to the Cisco Support Community. Today, we present a live Cisco Support Community Expert Series webcast event. Our topic today will be things I can do to protect my network from being hacked. My name is Monica Lewis. I am a Business Operation Manager from Cisco Support Community here at Cisco. Our expert joining me today is Jazib Frahim. He's a technical lead at Cisco and a double CCIE with broad experience deploying and securing networks. Welcome, Jazib.
Thank you, Monica.
Now, I'd like to briefly outline the format of today's Expert Series event. Jazib will start with a short presentation on how to protect your networks from being hacked for the first 25 minutes of the program. And then we will dive into the live question submissions for the remainder of the event. During our presentation, you may submit questions to be answered by Jazib and a team of Cisco technical experts using the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your console. The team of technical experts is very well versed in security technologies, so please begin posting your questions now to give us the best chance to answering them. If you experience any technical issues with WebEx, please post your issues in the chat window. We will be asking polling questions during this webcast, and we encourage you to participate by answering them. We invite you to close your email and other applications that may distract you during the virtual event. You may want to download a PDF presentation link using the link in the chat. So if you want to download the presentation, you may want to be able to do now. Let's get started with today's event. Let's start with a polling question for the audience. The question is, what is your primary role or function in the community in the company that you work for? A, is a network security engineer. B, you are a systems administrator. C, you are a network or IT manager. D, you are an IT executive or other. Please take a moment to answer, as this will give Jazib an opportunity to tailor his presentation to your needs. You will see the polling question on the right-hand side of your console. Make sure to submit your questions as we will answer them later in the webcast. Now, I would like to hand the mic to Jazib, who will give you an expert look into Cisco security technologies. Jazib, it's all yours.
Thank you, Monica. So many people often ask why, after spending tons of money on network and security gear, my network keeps getting hacked. My confidential information is lost, and my business continuity is disrupted. In short, they always ask questions such as, am I not buying the right security products? Am I not configuring or deploying them correctly? Do I not even have the right staff to run my network? Or is there something else that I'm missing in securely running my network? So in this session, what I'll do is I'll present a few case studies that may help you answer these questions and try to address this dilemma. I want to highlight that these case studies are actually real-life events or incidents that did occur in the past. Before I start in getting into these case studies, one key message that I want to share from my personal experience is that to completely defend against threats, we, the good guys, have to be right 100% of the time, while the miscreants, the bad guys, have to be right only once to do harm. So having said that, let me quickly go through the agenda with you. I'll start off by presenting a case study on an incident that occurred on the remote access part of an enterprise's network. I'll present the case study by sharing with you the details on what happened in that security incident, how it actually occurred, how it was detected, and whether or not any security best practices or products were deployed to protect the network infrastructure. I'll then discuss an incident that occurred in the branch office segment of an enterprise. Lastly, I'll cover a case study on an incident that occurred in the internet part of the network. After covering all these case studies, I'll go through the gaps and the reasons why those networks got compromised, and then discuss a few recommendations for the things that they could have done or should have done to mitigate against those security incidents. So before I dive into the details of the first security incident, let me talk about the remote access, how the remote access architecture looked like in that organization. So you can see that they had a combination of site-to-site tunnels and remote access SSL VPN tunnels connecting to a cluster of their ASAs in a headquarters office in New York. The site-to-site tunnels were between business partners, and the remote access connections included both the clientless connections as well as the client-based or any connect-based VPN tunnels. So what happened over a period of 3 to 4 weeks, that there were several unauthorized clientless SSL VPN connections that got terminated on their ASA cluster. In doing an assessment, they found out that they were a victim of a known vulnerability that was published back in 2010, wherein attacker could bypass authentication for their clientless SSL VPN connections. Apparently, their ASA cluster was not patched for this vulnerability, and after exploiting this vulnerability, the attacker was able to compromise other systems and store several documents in their infrastructure. So how exactly did they find this out? Well, their monthly activity report, they noticed a very strange username in the logs. The username wasn't really this that you're seeing on the screen, but was very unusual based on what their AD infrastructure should have. So during forensics, they noticed that the illegitimate user logged in 3 to 4 times a week. The username that, like I mentioned earlier, didn't conform to their AD user standard. And after further investigation, they determined that the authentication was being bypassed because their cluster wasn't patched for the vulnerability that I mentioned earlier. So you might be thinking, if they were not following any best security practices in their VPN infrastructure. Well, they were, and here's a list of things that they had deployed. So let me go through this list, very briefly with you. So they had a number of routers in front of the ASA cluster where they were only allowing the VPN traffic to pass through, those routers to the ASA cluster. They were leveraging the external authentication database, in this case, the Active Directory using NTLM authentication. They had idle and session timeouts enabled, so that if user connections are idle or if user connections are staying for X period of time, they could, get reset. They were leveraging dynamic access policies and enforcing a very restricted access into their infrastructure. For the client-based connections, they had disabled split tunneling so that all traffic passes through their VPN cluster, and then so that they can inspect traffic even if the traffic is going up to the internet. And then they had VPN traffic, fully inspected by the IPS devices in their infrastructure. So before I get into the recommendations and talk about the gaps for this security incident, let me go through 2 more security incidents, like I mentioned earlier. And before I get into the second case study, here is the second polling question. Monica, do you want to talk about it?
Sure. So this is before we get back to the presentation, I would like to take a moment to ask another polling question. So the question is, where do you typically hear about the security breaches or compromises in the enterprises? A, online. B, print media. C, television. D, social circles. Or E, other. Please submit your answers now. Remember that you can submit your technical questions now Jazib may continue with the presentation. We have the technical people that will be also answering some of those questions now, so please go ahead and submit your questions. Jazib, you may continue with the presentation.
Okay. Thanks, Monica. So the second case study is about a branch office network that got compromised. So from an architectural perspective, this is how their network topology looked like. You can see that it's pretty much a standard, branch office network that I know a lot of enterprises follow. So what happened was, over the past few years, this enterprise was focused on strengthening the overall posture of their network security. However, they failed to realize that physical security is as important as network security. So in one of their retail stores in Mobile, Alabama, someone broke in and stole tons of sensitive and public data from the corporate network. Let me go through how it happened in a bit more detail. So this organization had a number of stores where computer rooms were not physically secured. They didn't have their network gear in locked rooms that they should have. So someone took advantage of this gap and hid a wireless router behind some of their other network. They then connected the router to the store network and controlled access to that wireless router via a secure wireless connection. Once they had access to the network, they sniffed traffic that included sensitive customer data. They also transferred some critical data from the corporate network using the branch network, and then, of course, out of the organization over the wireless connect. So in terms of the security incident detection, for this enterprise, this was actually quite embarrassing because, they didn't discover this incident themselves. They were contacted by several law enforcement agencies because, the agency was investigating a number of fraudulent purchases throughout the country. And in their investigation, they found out that almost all of the credit cards that were used for fraudulent purchases had been used in this company over the past few months. So in terms of technologies, let me go through the list of best practices and technologies that they had in place for this branch office network. So for all of their network infrastructure devices, they were using, AAA authentication, authorization, and accounting to make sure that, only legitimate users are logging in. They are only doing stuff that they're authorized to do, and then they're logging all information of what those admins are doing when they're logged into the device. They're using secure protocols such as SSH, so they were not allowing any management traffic, passing through the network in clear text. They had full redundancy in terms of, logical links, physical devices. They were collecting traffic statistics using NetFlow and monitoring events that those devices were sending. They had full routing protocol security, so authenticating routing protocols, neighbors, making sure that the updates were being sent securely. Their WAN routers were also acting as firewalls and IPS devices for all of their branch office networks to protect against DDoS type attacks to their infrastructure. They were using control plane policing to make sure that even in case of an attack, the management and control plane is fully up and running. And that's why they had QoS deployed for traffic prioritization. And then since they were using a private WAN connection, they were using GetVPN to make sure that all traffic from the branch office network to the corporate office not purely sent. So that was the second case study. Let me go through the third case study for an incident that occurred in the Internet Edge part of the network. So in the third case study, this enterprise fired their chief security architect due to his behavioral issues. They didn't realize that employee had created several backdoor accounts on the AAA server that were used to authenticate network access of infrastructure devices when he was employed. They didn't know he did that until they had the security incident. So after a month of being fired, he logged into the network infrastructure and raised the configuration of several Internet Edge devices, including firewalls and routers. Additionally, he raised the backup configurations from the management server using his backdoor account. Ironically, he was the one that had initially created backup configuration scripts for this enterprise and had intimate knowledge of the management servers and their configuration. So let me talk a bit more. So what happened was he logged, like I said, he had backdoor accounts. He was able to SSH to the outside router, and then he used the internet edge routers as the stepping stone to connect to the firewalls. After he was connected to the firewall, he modified the rules on the firewalls so that he could punch in holes and could get access to the internal part of the network. After he got access to the internal part of the network, he started erasing the backup configurations on the server and then eventually erased even the configurations of the firewalls and the internet edge routers. How they detected this incident was, like I mentioned earlier, the organization didn't know that this ex-employee had backdoor accounts. So the way they found about this incident was when most of their internet edge devices were down and the network users couldn't get access to anything. So help desk started getting tons of calls from users, and support teams eventually found out what happens. So in terms of best practices and technologies they had in place, and you can see that a lot of these technologies are pretty much the same what they had in their enterprise part, in their branch office part of the network. So AAA on all their network infrastructure devices, secure protocols, through SSH or HTTPS type connections, redundancy, NetFlow, IPS everywhere, even URPF for anti-spoofing for their internet edge routers, firewall, that eventually got compromised, port security for devices that were connected to their DMZ infrastructure. So you could see that from a technology and best practices perspective, they had, a fairly good, list of things that were in place. So having covered these security incidents in detail, let me go through, some of the recommendations, in terms of how those networks, were compromised and what could have been done so that, those security incidents could have been proactively mitigated or avoided. So in reality, I can tell you cannot have 100% secure network infrastructure. No matter what product you deploy, what vendor you choose, whatever best practices you deploy, you will never, or you can never have fully, 100%, secure network infrastructure. The network and security devices can help you mitigate some of the risks, but you cannot solely rely on products and technologies alone to achieve security. And security is a continuous process, right? So you need to keep improving the security posture of your network infrastructure. Security challenges are, evolving on a daily basis. New threats are coming out every day, so you need to make sure that you're prepared and your network infrastructure is prepared to tackle all these evolving challenges in today's environment. You also need to create a baseline for your network security. The baseline should not only include, the traffic that's passing through your network, but should also, measure the operational activities that you conduct in the network in the form of metrics. So for example, one metric could be, how long does it take you to find the location of a device that could be sourcing illegitimate traffic on your network, right? Does it take you 5 minutes? Does it take you 10 minutes? Does it take you 1 hour? Because, you have to engage many different teams. You have to rely on other people. And that's why it takes you, X number of hours just to find, an end host that could be, sourcing illegitimate traffic. So a lot of people ask, why is it important to create, this baseline or to create these metrics? I usually give them an analogy to explain this concept in detail. So every morning I make coffee by carefully measuring several cups of ground coffee and several cups of water into a French press as a part of my daily morning ritual. I care about these measurements because they directly affect my morning and my mood. Similarly, network managers use the metrics to measure the effectiveness of various security components into their programs, products, or even processes. and the ability to staff to address, security issues for which they are responsible for. Security metrics can also help in identifying the level of risk and not taking a given action. So in short, it provides better answers to hard questions, such as, are we more secure today than we were before? Have we improved from last year? Are we secure enough? So in the first case, a security incident, the problem was clearly a patch management issue, right? So most companies do not realize how much their network infrastructure is susceptible to attacks if they don't have a good patch management process in place. So let me share with you how a typical patch management timeline looks like. A vendor identifies and announces a vulnerability for a product or software. So if you're subscribed to receive notifications, you identify all those devices that are affected within your network for that advisory. It is possible that vendor has identified workarounds that you could implement quickly. You need to identify, what those workarounds are, and then apply those workarounds in your environment so that you can quickly mitigate against those things even before deploying a fully patched software. So while a workaround is being placed, you obtain the patch or fix for that vulnerability from that vendor. But before you deploy it into your production environment, you need to make sure that you test it out first in your lab infrastructure or limited environment so that you can certify it even before deploying it into your network infrastructure. So once the patch or image is certified, then of course you schedule a maintenance window to roll it out into your production environment. So the key here that I want to highlight is that you need to really have a good you really need to subscribe to all the available notification methods that your vendors use. If they use RSS feeds, then you need to make sure that you're subscribed to those. If they use aliases or any other way of communicating their announcements, then you want to make sure that you're subscribed to those things so that you are aware of those things. And the second thing is, once you're aware of the vulnerability into a product or software, you really need to have a really good process in place where you can deploy the software after certifying it into the production environment, and while you're doing that, you have workarounds in place to protect your network infrastructure. So patch management is a very proactive mechanism. So a lot of enterprises, often ask, what can they do from a incident management perspective, when incidents do occur on the network. So let me quickly talk about the incident management process as well. So the incident management process starts once an event occurs on the network. So this event could be anything related to the network, from a failure of a switch to a hacking attempt on critical servers. It will take some time before the support teams detect that incident, it takes some time before the support teams spend to verify that the incident is indeed, so the event is indeed an incident, right? So they have to go through a number of automated or manual techniques to remove any false positive, and when it does become a true anomaly, then they are fully engaged to address and contain the incident in a timely fashion to decrease any potential for damage or loss associated with the incident. So for the second security incident, there were two major gaps in the form of the ability to detect illegitimate devices on the network and the gaps around physical network infrastructure security. I bet not a lot of people on this call know what this device is at the bottom of the slide. And in case you don't know, it's actually a full-fledged PC that looks like just a regular power adapter, but it's running Linux. And if someone has plugged this device into your network, they could attack your network all day long. So, and that's where all the processes and all your metrics come in, right? So if someone has this device in place, how can you quickly identify where this device is physically located on your network infrastructure. So from a recommendation perspective, the enterprise, that was where the security incident occurred, they should deploy, technologies such as, 802.1x to gain visibility in terms of what devices and users are connecting, and then enforce, what those devices or users can do once, they have successfully provided their credentials. Similarly, like I said, you want to make sure that there is visibility in terms of who's logging into the network. So many enterprises leverage Active Directory, for example, for authentication. So what if someone does not log into the Active Directory domain? How do you handle, those type of users? Do you treat them as guest users and provide them with limited access to the network, or should you just provide them with internet access and not provide any access to your corporate or your enterprise network? Those are some of the things that you really have to evaluate and determine what risks are associated with those things. Like I mentioned, the second major gap was around physical security, right? So even though it sounds like a simple common sense, but wherever they have their network gear, they should make sure that they're locking the network gear into a secure wiring closet. Of course, if it's a public place such as a retail store, they should consider 24/7 monitoring via cameras. So in case of a network breach, they should be able to trace it back to the user, who walked into the wiring closet. Finally, for the in the third security incident, the enterprise lacked processes around network and security operations. They didn't have a good process around deleting accounts for departing employees. They didn't have an audit process for their AAA servers. They didn't have a process and procedures around device configuration management. In this case, they should have considered developing, processes so that device configurations were only changed during maintenance windows. So even if someone tried to modify device configurations during off hours or over the weekend, they would, get an alert about it. On the technical side, they should not accept, they shouldn't have accepted SSH traffic on the internet edge routers without any, access control protections. There are billions of addresses or devices out on the internet. Do you trust all of those devices and provide them an opportunity to connect to the outside interfaces of your internet edge devices? Probably not a good thing to do. Additionally, their firewalls were accepting SSH traffic on their untrusted or outside interfaces from the internet edge router. Firewall is the first layer of defense into the network. Why would you want to expose its management access to the world without deploying proper security mechanisms into the firewall? Similarly, if someone is modifying firewall configurations outside of maintenance windows or during off hours, do you really want to get an alert about it? So a lot of these things sound like common sense type stuff, but you'll be surprised how many people don't really follow these things, and then eventually they get compromised. They literally spent millions of dollars on software, security network products, but then they fail to develop proper operations, proper processes, proper guidelines, how those devices should be used, should be configured, and then and then depending on the function of each device, how those devices should be properly configured. I've listed a number of useful references. Some of them are Cisco links, some of them are great links that you can go out to get more information about security incidents and things you can do to protect the overall infrastructure, your infrastructure from security incidents. Cisco Advanced Services also has a service called Security Architectural Assessment Service, where they can also evaluate an enterprise network from these metrics perspective, right? So if you don't have metrics defined and you don't have a baseline how security operations are set up, then the Cisco Advanced Services team can also help you in doing a security assessment on their infrastructure using the metrics and providing gaps that you may have. So I added a link there as well. Monica, do you want to cover the polling question?
Sure, absolutely. So before we start with the Q&A section of today's presentation, let's go to our last polling question and invite you to the audience to participate in that. So the polling question is, have you created a baseline for operational and technical activities that occur on your network? A, yes. We have already a good baseline. B, yes. We are in the process of creating a baseline. C, no. We are thinking about it. Or D, no. We are not thinking about it. Please take a moment to answer those polling questions, and we will be presenting some of the results. So take a minute or so to do that. In the meantime, I really want to thank Jazib for the great presentation, and thank you everyone for you that have been participating on the polling questions. So let's go ahead and close out the polling so that we can see the results.
It's just finishing up, Monica. It'll be about 10 seconds. Thanks.
Perfect. Let's give it a few more seconds here so that everybody can see the answers here.
It's just compiling them.
Perfect.
I'll just share them.
So as we can see, most of the people responded to answer number C, which is not, but we are thinking about it. Jazib, do you want to make any comment about this?
Sure. Yeah. So what we have seen is that a lot of people, do look at security from a technology perspective, from software and hardware and product perspective, and then when we ask them about their operational activities around the metrics, how they measure, their audit process, how they measure, activities that occur on their network infrastructure, they typically don't have a good answer because they haven't really thought about security from that perspective. So I completely agree with these results because you see very limited or very small number of people that have a good baseline around their security operations and their infrastructure. I have seen a number of enterprises moving towards defining those metrics and creating that baseline. And as you saw, Monica, a number of people said no, they don't have a baseline, but they're thinking about it. So which is a good step in the right direction. So these numbers make complete sense.
Perfect. Thank you, Joseph. Now we will get into the live Q&A. We will be, by the way, if you cannot stay with us for the Q&A portion, please be sure to click on the evaluation link that will be provided in the chat to let us know how this session met your business needs and expectations. We really are very, very much interested in knowing which are the topics that you want to hear in a future webcast. So I really hope that you stay in the Q&A and you participate, making a lot of questions to Jazib and the panel of experts. But if for some reason you can't, please make sure to provide us with your feedback about the event. So let's go ahead and start. We have gotten a few questions here, and I really would like to encourage the audience to keep asking more and more questions. We have like 20 minutes worth of questions, so please make sure to ask the questions now. So Jazib, the first question to you is the following. How do you define IT metrics in an enterprise that does not have those metrics?
Yeah, it's a good question, Monica. So like I mentioned a few minutes back, a number of enterprises that don't really think about security from these operational activities or metrics perspective. So if someone doesn't have these IT metrics defined, either they can engage someone who has done defining these metrics, or at a minimum they can start evaluating their processes, right? So do they have processes around different things, and then if they do, then start auditing those processes. So for example, in the third case study, you saw that even though they were doing authentication on external AAA servers, but they didn't have a process when someone was leaving the IT group or leaving the company, they were disabling their accounts. So and even if they had a process, were they following that process or not, right? So that's where you have to then start doing audits and then see where exactly you fall, right? So, if you have a process, then, do an audit and see, how many illegitimate user accounts you have on the AAA server, So what % of errors do you find? How often, for example, do you define or how often do you do that audit, right? So do you look at your AAA user database every 3 months, 6 months, once a year type stuff, or do you do it more periodically or not? So I would say in that case, and to answer your question, Monica, is start off with whatever processes you have, start doing the audit, and then start defining the metrics related to the processes you have. That would be a good start.
Perfect. Thank you, Jazib. The second question that I have for you is, can you give a few examples of the metrics that we can use to start from?
Okay. So I think that question is somewhat related to my earlier comment. So, you have, you can start from the processes you have, in your organization, and then once you start auditing your processes, then from there you can start creating the baseline, or your start defining your metrics. So if I look at case study number one, perhaps, where the problem was with the patch management of their remote access VPN infrastructure. From a metric perspective, do you have a process of receiving alerts and notifications from your vendor? Once there is a vulnerability in your OS or product, how long does it take you to deploy a workaround? Is it 1 day, 5 days, 1 week, 1 month, right? So again, you have to look at your process and then start auditing that process. How long does it take you to even retrieve the patch from the vendor? How long does it take you to certify an image into your network infrastructure? From an incident management perspective, how long does it take you to detect that there is an event occurring on the network, right? Does your support teams or your help desk find it out in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 1 hour? Or do they rely on live users calling the support teams whenever they don't get access to certain parts of the network? Some of the other metrics could be how long it takes for you to contain that incident, right? So once you know that there is an anomaly occurring on the network, how long does it take you to contain that? Does it take you 1 hour? And I understand it could take the time duration could vary, right? Some incidents do get contained in 5 minutes. Some incidents takes 1 week or whatever. But what is your mean time, right? So how on average, how long does it take you? That's where you start defining the baseline and metrics, and start evaluating yourself against those metrics.
Perfect. Thank you, Jazib. The third question that we have is the following. When defining the metrics, do you need to use any IT framework?
Yeah, there are a number of frameworks that are available. I know when Cisco Advanced Services team does these security assessments, they follow Cisco's SCF framework, Cisco Security Control Framework, which evaluates an infrastructure from an identification perspective, from monitoring perspective, from correlation perspective, to gain visibility in terms of who's logging into the network, what devices are getting access on the network, and do they have full monitoring and correlation capabilities deployed. And then once they have full visibility into their infrastructure, then how well they are doing in enforcing controls in the form of how well they're hardening their network infrastructure, how well they're segmenting the users from servers from other parts of the network, or how well they're doing in terms of even enforcing the security policies into the network infrastructure. So Cisco uses the Cisco SCF framework, but there are other frameworks available. The CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity and availability. So you can pretty much use any framework you want.
Perfect. We invite you to keep asking those questions. We still have about 6 more minutes to go on the questions. Another question that came in is, what are the key network devices that we need to focus on when securing an infrastructure?
Good question. It's not just about focusing on key network devices, right? It's mainly about defining the processes and operations and then following them properly. So, it could be any network device, right? It could be a router, switch, firewall, IPS, so any network infrastructure device, and then, any security device that, that you may have. It could be about, the AAA servers. It could be the end servers which are handling the identity component of your network infrastructure. So I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, I think it's any device that you have in the network. You really need to focus on those, but then you really need to focus on how you create processes and on operational activities around them, and then how well you follow those things.
Right. Another question. Let's say a DDoS attack is happening right now in a company which we work. What are the migration techniques we have to use at that point to control the impact on the network? I will appreciate any kind of information you can provide.
Can you repeat that one more time?
So the scenario is, let's say that we have a DDoS attack that is happening into a company right now. Mm-hmm. What would be the mitigation techniques that you can use at that point? If you can provide more information about this scenario.
Sure. So if there is a DDoS attack occurring on the network, you really need to understand, what type of DDoS attack it is, right? Is it focused on, certain, protocols? Is it UDP based, TCP based? You really need to start classifying it somehow. So if the attack is going through some Cisco routers, you can quickly deploy, the classification ACL to understand, the type of the DDoS attack. And then once you kind of have a baseline in terms of or the characteristics of the attack, then you can, again, if I don't know what type of network and infrastructure devices that network or that enterprise has, but if they don't have anything, then they really want to start off with something. Then once they have classified the data that the attacker is using, or the type of the attack, then the best option is to start deploying infrastructure ACLs or the transient ACLs to start dropping the packets.
Perfect. The next question that I have here is, are all the incidents that you presented on today's presentation real? I think they were, but maybe you want to expand a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so all of these incidents, like I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, they're all real. You could think that why would someone not apply access control protections on their network infrastructure, at the internet edge part of the network infrastructure? But you'll be surprised. A lot of enterprises, they just either don't realize that it's important, or they had opened up something to provide temporary access to something, and then after that they forgot to remove those configurations or whatever. But so all of these incidents are real. Of course, I can't really disclose the name of the enterprises, but if you had followed the incidents and how they happened, and if you had heard about those incidents in the newspaper or online, then you could really correlate the enterprise names.
Perfect. Thank you. So we have time for 2 more questions here. The next question is, what is the best way to ensure that the network is fully protected?
Like I mentioned earlier, I mean, you cannot have 100% secure network infrastructure. But of course, by making sure that you're following the leading security practices for whatever product you have, whatever device you have, and not just looking at the product level, but even looking at it from an architectural level, does those things make sense? So that's one thing. But again, I'll keep on emphasizing that you really need to have, processes and procedures in place that, you really follow them very closely, and then enforce and audit your operations to create the baseline for the network activities.
Perfect. So last question, is there a complete list of metrics that I should be looking at, and how often do I need to refine these metrics?
Like I mentioned earlier, the Cisco Advanced Services team, when they audit an enterprise, they have a list of metrics. I don't think it's posted on Cisco.com, but it has a list of all the base metrics that enterprises should follow, and then of course, based on your vertical, based on your function of the company, there will be a number of metrics that are solely focused around your enterprise. So I don't want to say there is a full list of metrics that you can just download from somewhere and start measuring your network against that list. But yeah, I think there is a list available that I don't know if it's posted on CCO or Cisco.com, but at least Cisco internal resources, they have that list where defines the base, all the base metrics that enterprises should follow.
Perfect. Thank you, Jazib. This concludes the Q&A portion of today's event. Thank you to Jazib Frahim for the excellent work. And I also want to thank Larry Eddy and Omar Santos. They were the 2 panelist experts that were answering some of the questions in the chat panel. Remember that the first 5 listeners to complete the evaluation survey will receive a $20 gift certificate card as a part of appreciation. So go ahead and fill out the survey before leaving the session today. Jazib will be hosting an Ask the Expert event from today until Friday, September 23rd. So if you have any additional questions, log on to the Cisco support community and click on the Ask the Expert tab on top, and that will take you to Jazib's session. He will continue to answer the questions for the next 2 weeks, so take advantage of that and ask any questions that you have to Jazib. I want to also announce the next webcast that is going to happen on October 18th. The topic is Cisco Video Communication Server. The expert is Arne Vergeton Ostensen, and he's a customer support engineer from Norway. We will be posting the registration link on the Cisco support community so that you can register for that in a few days. The link will be, you can go to supportforums.cisco.com, and surely once we have the link available, we will be able to provide that on the support forums. I also want to let you know about our first webcast in Polish. That is going to happen on Tuesday, September 27th, and at 10 p.m. 10 a.m. Warsaw time. It is with Gavel Mikolajczyk on the security architecture for corporate networks. So if you are Polish or you speak Polish, take advantage of this presentation because it's going to be in line with what we had today on the presentation. The link to the register, you can go to bit.ly/Polish-webcast. I want to let you know, if you are not aware of this already, that we have a variety of social media channels like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and you can also download the application to be able to access the support community from your iPad. So here are a few links. We will be posting the presentation, all the Q&A questions that were answered today in the webcast page, like by Friday. And by going to the supportforums.cisco.com, you will see some of those links of Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube on top, and we welcome you to be part of those members so that you can also take advantage of our social media. And lastly, I just want to let you know that we have communities not only in English, but we have it in Polish, Japanese, and Spanish. You can get to those from the language pull-down menu. And we are right now in a pilot with Russian and Portuguese, and we are inviting people to participate in the pilot. So if you speak any of those languages, you can send your registration request for Russian and Portuguese so that we can add you to the pilot, or you are welcome to participate on Polish, Japanese, or Spanish on the community. Please take a moment to fill out the evaluation. It is really very important for us to receive your feedback about this session and also about what you want to hear from us in a future event. So I really want to thank you, our experts, Jazib, Larry, and Omar, for sharing your expertise with us. And thank you, and have a great day.
Thanks, Monica.